Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Everybody Has a Podcast. Man, doesn't it seem like everybody has a podcast these days? I'm Andy, your host, and today I have with me David Guttman. He is the host of his own podcast show that is the top 50 show inside Apple Business Podcast. Congratulations, David. You guys have probably already heard of him. You don't know who the heck I am, but you already know who this guy is. So we're going to jump right into it today. First of all, David, thank you so much for coming to the studio.
Andy, thanks for having me.
For people who already know you, they've heard you tell the story about being given 6 months to live after being misdiagnosed, and you've lived 35 years now beyond that point. So I do kind of want to start there to kind of frame some things, but I want to share how that all the way over here in your timeline in history has woven its way through success, challenges, failures, selling out from multiple 8 and 9 figure businesses, and then doing a podcast. What the heck? So let's paint a little bit of backstory, and then we're going to talk about podcasting today.
Sure. So I was 24. I'd been a Division I college wrestler, a competitive triathlete, like the healthiest person, never drank alcohol, like not a drop, never had a drug, never smoked a cigarette, like the healthiest person I knew. And then I had 3 different doctors tell me I had 6 months to live. So for about a month, I really thought I would be dead in 6 months. In fact, my last misdiagnosis was at Memorial Sloan Kettering, which is best cancer hospital in the world. So like when a top oncologist at Sloan Kettering says, get your affairs in order, like you actually do. And it ended up being, maybe other than my daughter being born, literally the best thing that ever happened to me. Because when you think about it, most people, they face their mortality, they're in their 70s, their 80s, whatever, then they die. Like there's not much time to make any course correction, if you will. I had my whole adult life ahead of me. So it changed the entire trajectory of my life. I don't think I was a bad guy. I really wasn't. I was a decent guy. But it just made me a much better human being. And what it did was it forced me to think about success as a side effect instead of a goal. And that changed everything.
Wow, success as a side effect, not a goal. Talk about that. Because most people are just chasing success. Like we're rampantly running down this, we're careening in the fast lane at 90 miles an hour or 100 or whatever you're doing to get to this thing. And then you get to this thing and you're like, oh, it's not what I thought it was.
So the way I thought about it, I still remember, can I curse?
Your episode.
Okay. The mindfuck of the whole thing was, I went into Sloan Kettering for a biopsy, and they thought the symptom I had was I was having trouble breathing. I had a massive, mass in my chest that was pinching my trachea shut. So they're like, there's no benign condition that presents this way. There's no way. And if it's that massive, it's everywhere, right? So when they went to go take the biopsy, they're like, oh shit, it's a cyst, not a tumor. They were completely wrong. So I was on the operating table for 3 hours. And because I was on the operating table for so long, while they were trying to break it up and drain the cyst as best they could, because that's not what they were expecting. They were expecting a tumor. I had to stay in the hospital overnight. So I'm in a cancer hospital, surrounded by people that are dying. The guy in the bed next to me just had his leg amputated because of bone cancer. So if you can't like rethink your life in a situation like that, like the weirdest survivor's guilt you can imagine. And I basically promised myself that I was going to touch everyone's life that I could touch in a positive way, I would. And what I found, much to my surprise, if I'm being honest, was that the less I focused on myself, the better my life for myself got. And that is how I've lived my life for the last 35 years. And I've been very successful. I've had 8 and 9 figure exits. But the journey was a hell of a lot more enjoyable because I wasn't focused on me.
But the way you're talking about it is very, I don't want to say similar for the same as sameness, but like other people that have had a life-threatening disease or moment or whatever happen, that then they make it through unscathed. There's like the survivor guilt on one side, but then there's like this purpose-driven part on the other. And so was it like at that same moment where you're like, okay, everything else I'm going to do is going to have this thread woven through it to be defined by this? Because you don't know this, but literally in real time, yesterday in this same studio, I had a survivor who's 17, 3-time brain cancer, chemo at 2 and 3, chemo at 6 and 7, and chemo from 10 to 14.
Wow.
Now is a living 3-time avoided brain cancer from killing him, is an ambassador for Make-A-Wish and a spokesperson for Kaiser Permanente. 17-year-old kid.
Wow.
Now, I'm much older than that. We're much older than that. But I see this thread of like this purpose drivenness that now is the engine moving everything else, not out of the way, but along the way. How was that for you in going out of that season into all these other ones that people would from the outside look and go, look at all this wild success this guy's had financially and how lucrative it is for him?
I've made a lot of millionaires. You know, it's like, it's weird as it's going to sound, is it's way more fun and enjoyable for me to make someone else money than to make myself money. Not that I'm a fan of money too. It's not that I'm allergic to it. But think about it when you give a gift. Even when you get a really thoughtful gift from someone you care deeply about, that's really a wonderful experience. But it's a way more fun experience to give that really thoughtful gift to someone you care deeply about. And like, you're planning it for weeks or even months, and you're so excited about the look on their face. I remember years ago, I surprised my daughter. I had a song professionally written for my daughter. And I remember her reaction being, "Where'd you find a song with my name in it?" I'm like, "No, I had the song written for you." But it's like, I was like, for months before I was giving her how much I was looking forward to it. It's just so much more enjoyable. And again, the only thought I have, because I don't believe life has intrinsic meaning, but I don't see that as a bad thing. That means I get to decide what has meaning. And so for me, what I decided was that being able to touch other people's lives in a positive way is what was going to give my life meaning. And it has.
How have you found contentment in your life? Because I talked to a lot of people in this set, okay? And people find joy or happiness in lots of things, so lots of different experiences. Sometimes it's things, sometimes it's achieving this success milestone or whatever. What does contentment mean to you personally?
It really comes down to something very simple for me. I only want to spend my time doing things I find useful and enjoyable with people I like. So I just won't do things I don't like with people I don't like. And so long as that's true, and like I mentor a lot of people, probably a dozen people I actively mentor every single week. Mm-hmm. Some of which I have a financial interest in, some of which I don't. Mm-hmm. And I treat them all the same. It's so enjoyable to me. And the people that I because there have been people I've mentored in the past where it hasn't been enjoyable, and I stopped doing that.
Yeah.
And so
more pain than it's worth.
Exactly, more pain than it's worth. And so really just deciding that I'm only going to spend my time, because I'm turning 60 in a couple of weeks, mm-hmm. and I plan on being around for a while, but not forever.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely on the back nine, no matter how you slice it. So I'm going to I can make more money. I can't make more time.
One of our selfish initiatives for even creating this show, Everybody Has a Podcast, is because I already believe I'm in the second half of my life, and I want to live out the rest of my life as the best of my life. I've done really cool things in the first half of my life as an adult and as a business person. I've met a lot of amazing people. I had been hospitalized and then had to burn down my company and file bankruptcy and burn all to the ground and start something new because of that. And then a few short years right after that, my wife got diagnosed with cancer. And then we walked through that. And I'm like, okay, time out. Contentment has to look different to me. What we do next has to look different to me. I want to do things with people I like. I want to do things that are enjoyable for me, that I have fun. At the end of the day, I go, you know what? That was a day well spent. That was time that was worth it. And I'm remembering something. I'm taking something from it, and I'm growing because of it. And I really desperately want to help people do that for themselves too, because I spent younger years chasing money and chasing some sort of fame of whatever nature or degree you want to call it. And man, sometimes it's not all you think it is, or that it's cracked up to be. It's not that I don't like nice things. I love fast cars. I love things that have a big price tag. However, they don't bring me as much joy and contentment as when my wife was walking through cancer and I was trying to get out of the studio as fast as possible so I could get home and sit on the couch next to her, just sit next to her.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be there. I didn't care. I didn't care if I had an apartment, a motorhome, a mansion. It didn't matter to me. I was like, I just want to be there. And have you found that entering this season of life and now becoming a podcaster, that this is worth your time doing? You're clearly doing it, so it must meet that test for you.
So my journey to get into the podcast, if someone told me 5 years ago I'd be doing a podcast, I'd be like, what drugs are you taking? What are you talking about? The part that's going to sound crazy is I have very few regrets in my life. At the very top of the list of my regrets is I didn't do it 5 years ago.
Why?
So when I started a podcast, I started recording in October of 2024, released my first episode in like December of 2024, so just a little bit over a year and a few months ago. I basically decided I wasn't even going to try to monetize for a year. I wasn't even going to consider it, that I was just going to do it for a year and just see, right? And it's completely different than I would have expected in every way you could think it was different. One, the single best networking tool ever invented. Like, not even close. Nothing's even close, right? I mean, LinkedIn, not even in the same galaxy, right? I probably have 10 or 12 friends, close friends, that I met through my podcast. I've made, again, without trying to monetize, with the equity, somewhere between 5 and 10 million in my first year without trying, right? I've met some of the coolest people. The other thing that is that, you know, I'm not a person I'm not a materialistic person. I don't, there are a lot of people that are car people. I'm not a car person. In fact, I have a Tesla that annoys the shit out of me. I have to plug the damn thing in. I'm like, because I mostly lived in cities where, Chicago, New York, places you don't need a car.
Yeah.
Right. And so, in fact, when I moved to Arizona, basically to help my brother with some health issues, I had owned a car in over 20 years.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, I'm just not a materialistic person. I spend money on experiences.
Yeah.
So that's what I think makes the most sense. But everyone, again, no judgment. For me, it's about the experience. And man, podcasting, what's amazing about it is I learn from every person I have been interviewed by or that I have on my podcast as a guest. I always learn something, always. The part that I didn't expect is I'm actually even learning things from myself, because there's a different experience between thinking something and saying it. Or when you're having to explain why you did something or didn't do something or thought something, you just internalize it in a different way. So I gain insights even from myself. So I just have found that my own personal growth over the year plus that I've been doing this I've grown more in the last year and a half than the last 5 years.
Wow. I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people we encounter from the producing side, they have hesitation, and they're still in a season of their life where they're trying to build the thing. They have their company, or they have their product, or they have their service offering, or they have their product. And they're using the podcast as leverage to do the network part, invite a guest on you want, bring a business partner or referral partner that you can demonstrate your teamwork together and how you work together and those kinds of things, which is all in an effort to an end to either achieve more, open new doors, add to the top line, bottom line, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have to do all that stuff. So you've had the benefit of doing those things. Financially, you've had the benefit of that. That's amazing, man. That's a tremendous result. Not everybody gets that result. But you're still saying that you would have started it sooner. And you're kind of also maybe addressing that crowd that hasn't done it yet and they need to. Beyond you just saying it's important to do, what do you see in other people that's so valuable in them doing a podcast?
I guess I would say it this way. If you don't have at least one thing, one subject matter area that you could talk intelligently about that other people can benefit from, you're not trying hard enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, who doesn't know? It doesn't matter what underwater basket weaving, pickleball, it doesn't matter, right? It's got to be something.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was talking to a guy the other day who was basically told me he was, again, I met him through a business deal that someone else was putting together, and I was just trying to be helpful. And he said, Dave, can I ask you a question? I was like, sure. He's like, can I just ask you for some advice? I'm just feeling frozen in my life. And I, so we talked a little bit about where he was and why he was frozen and all of that. And the two pieces of advice I gave to him was write a book and start a podcast. He had a background in sales, right? I'm like, dude, you should be starting a podcast about sales, and maybe you focus on AI in sales and how it's changing, sales, whatever it might be, become an expert in that area, do a TED Talk, publish a book, everything to help elevate your brand. But even then, when I think about the approach I took to it and the approach I advise other people, because you probably know the statistic, I think it's 80% of people that start a podcast do 4 episodes or less. And it's like 99% do 20 episodes or less. It's
Correct.
Like a tiny percentage.
Yep.
And like most things in life, most people give up too soon, right? So you've got to make that investment of time, energy, and money and decide this is something you're going to give a period of time. In my case, I decided I was going to dedicate a year minimum before I'd even evaluate how it went.
Right.
And what I did was I was focused on no outcome. I was simply focused on trying to do it really well. And what I feel good about is probably 75% of the time when I've had someone on my podcast that's been on multiple podcasts, they comment to me, this is the best episode I've ever done. I can't thank you enough.
Wow.
And that, that feels really good because I try really hard that I feel like if I've done it well, I've shown that person the absolute best version of that person.
Yeah.
I've been able to extract things from them that make them look better than even they thought they could look.
Yeah.
In fact, I was just at the other reason I was in San Diego this week, I was at a longevity conference here, and the CEO of one of the companies I had on my podcast was on, and I was meeting some of the people that worked with him. They're like, I've known him for 20 years, and when I was watching the podcast, I learned all those things about him I didn't even know. It's like and by the way, I never prepare questions, ever. What I do is I'll watch the episodes they've done on other podcasts so that I won't repeat the same things.
Yeah.
But you probably, I'm sure you know this, the part that's hard is you have to stay really, really present so you can be listening to what they're saying.
Yeah.
But also be thinking a little bit ahead so you know what direction to take the conversation. But if you do that well, the people will really appreciate it. And so I try really hard to do that. And all the other good things that have come to me, the friendships, the investments, the people that have paid me to help them with their businesses, those were side effects. Those were not the goal.
That wasn't the purpose, at
all.
It was just a great outcome.
It was literally them coming to me saying, please help me with this.
Yeah.
I had one guy literally, I was helping, he's like, Dave, I want to give you equity in my business. I'm like, you don't need to. I'm happy to do it for free.
He's trying to give it to you.
Yeah, he's like, please, I'm insisting you take. Okay, fine. But like literally, I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's like, the fact that I'm going to help. He's going to sell this business within 12 months for over $100 million.
Wow.
And the fact that I was able to help him do that, and he's 25 years old, like that's so exciting to me.
Good for you, man. That's awesome. That's effort well spent. And I'm really glad that you said you really wanted to do it well. You weren't vanity metric focused. And I think that's something that a lot of people are getting misguided on. There's a lot of, everyone should have a podcast. Like it's literally the name of our show. And I know that everybody won't, because some people are going to quit early. Some people won't even start at all. But I love that you mentioned that you're focusing on doing it well. And I think that is overlooked. It may look like all of this is easy, but there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes, and the people that you enjoy watching the most typically aren't just showing up, turning the lights on, and shooting from the hip. That doesn't really work out too well. That doesn't work out well in business either. Usually, and here's the funny thing, is people will give themselves more of an opportunity to make it in business for a longer period of time, no matter what distress they might face, than they do in podcasting, which is now a part of business, and they're almost becoming migrated. The CEO trend of all these CEOs having shows right now is evidence to everyone else that they either got to figure out their own version of that or some version of replacing their marketing dollars to make up for not doing it. That's what I see.
Well, and the reality is that you're completely right. Like, when I was looking at my initial, 7 people watched that episode, 20 people watched the episode, 50 people watched the episode. You could drive yourself crazy looking at those numbers. The reality is there are all kinds of ways to inflate those numbers if you wanted to. It's a fool's errand.
To what end, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so instead of thinking about the vanity metrics, I just focused on putting my head down, trying to get good guests and try to do a really good job of interviewing them. And I had people like, I had some relatives on. I had my mother-in-law who, was Afghan and, was basically there when the Soviets invaded, and her story was crazy. Like so many really cool stories. I had actually the sister of the guy who has the $100 million exit that we're working towards. His sister has a clothing brand. I had her on the podcast. She's doing it as a lifestyle business. I don't have as many women, generally not looking at lifestyle businesses. So I try to have a mix and match of everything. But the fact that you're not focused on the outcome, that needs to be the way to look at it, because otherwise you drive yourself crazy. And just in the last 6 months, so I've been at it for almost a year. When I first started, I had people coming up to me on the street saying, hey, I was watching your episode the other day.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, and I really appreciate that.
I also like that you've had people that we've produced shows for and with before.
Oh, yeah?
You don't know that, but I'm going to tell you right now.
Sure.
Jarvis Leverson, one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Nick, sorry, not Nick. Slick Nick. Rick Nimi.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
Douglas James.
Yeah.
So they've all been either guests on shows that we produced for. I actually had Rick here in that chair 2 weeks ago.
He's great.
So I had him. That was an awesome conversation. And he just started his podcast too. Again, another guy that doesn't need to start a podcast because of money or success or whatever, but choosing to do so because of some purpose and intent and motive way beyond just the dollar on the page. And I love that. it's encouraging to me because I don't have a monetary outcome for this for me either. I am looking at how can I encourage other people to see the value of their story existing in online space, regardless of who watches it. And to your point, it only takes one guy to say, I need to give you equity. It doesn't take a million people to offer that. It only takes one. And there's a lot of ways to inflate that and all that other garbage. But honestly, for me, I also know that when you do something long enough, it's going to reveal who you are or reveal who you're trying to cover up. And a lot of people are going to think they got to be someone different on camera than they're off camera. And then they're just pretending the whole time. And that eventually gets seen. And then that's when you should stop your show.
Well, it's funny. I was one of the guys whose podcast I would say if there's someone who I, want to emulate more than anyone, it's probably someone like a Gary Vee. I feel like he's, and I'm looking at his numbers, and of course his numbers are amazing. But then I looked, he started in 2005. He's been at it for over 2 decades. And I'm like, I've only been at this for a year. So, a little bit over a year. So it's like slow and steady wins the race.
I talk about Gary Vee all the time because he is like, don't try to script everything. Don't try to make everything. Just document everything. And I love that approach because, he's had a variety of camera people and creative directors with him from all those 2 decades of doing that work. But look what he has to show for it. Yeah. There's an argument in our space, and not an argument. Maybe it's just 2 different factions of opinion is, and I'll state it this way and you can tell me what you think. Is Gary Vee predicting what's coming next or causing what's coming next? What would you say it is?
I think it's more predicting. I certainly think he has influence for sure. So I'm sure it's nudging things along, and maybe they happen a little sooner because of him.
More people try it.
Yeah. But what's interesting about that is, because my team that does all my post-production stuff, they're always on me because I don't document stuff enough. It's like it's hard to stay present and also be documenting everything you do. It's really hard to do both. And to me, if I have to choose, I'd rather be present and have things take longer. Probably drives my team a little crazy. But the other thing I would say too is, for me, there are lots of ways I could have grown a lot faster, doing things that are a little bit more, Andrew Tate-ish, where you're really trying to be, create, controversy. Mm-hmm. Not interested in doing that. I'm completely fine with it taking longer. I need to do it in a way that feels authentic for me. Because I think ultimately the only way that a podcast for anybody is going to ultimately be satisfying, however you want to define satisfaction, is going to be if you're authentic. And I think that's one of the things people miss just in general is people really struggle with authenticity. And to me, it's one of the single most important factors in having a satisfying life.
Yeah, it would feel incongruent if you mentioned Andrew Tate. I think it would be incongruent to what people know you for. That it would be like that goes back to you're putting it on. You're trying to become this thing for this other end, but then that's actually not really you. And then you get smoked out, and people go, "Oh, you're a bullshitter."
Well, look, I mean, like I'm also fine. Like I can do things that are my point of view. As an example, like on one of the podcasts I did one with on Fleischman's podcast where I ripped up my Wharton MBA because I think college is bullshit. I think an MBA is bullshit, and I got one. Yeah, right.
Yeah, you're like, I have this thing, and I'm also telling you. Yeah,
yeah. It's like back then it was a bad ROI. Now it's horrendous. Yeah, right. To spend $500,000 getting an MBA makes absolutely no sense. Back when I was growing up, back at that time, there was no YouTube. Like your ability to acquire knowledge and information was just a fraction of what it is now. Nowadays, yeah, if you want to, be an engineer and build bridges, maybe, but for the average person, college and business school makes no sense.
So I have people that tell me sometimes that they, actually, I should probably preface it this way. I have people, David, that tell me after having a 15, 20, 25 or 30 year career, I don't know what I would talk about. Okay, first of all, I was looking for a reaction of some sort. Okay, great. Got the reaction. What would you tell that person?
What kind of life are you leading? I can't even imagine. Like, how do you not have things to talk about? Honestly, the part that that's most challenging about being the interviewer is it isn't about you, right? Yeah, you want to sprinkle in some of your own knowledge and wisdom as part of it, and you want to direct the conversation, but it's about your guest, right? And I actually, like for me, to being interviewed is very easy. Being the interviewer is much harder. I mean, I remember last year at CryoCon, I'm the chairman of the Cryotherapy Industry Association, so that's why I go to a lot of these wellness conferences. And I did 13 podcasts in 2 days. I thought my brain was going to melt.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard to do that. But being interviewed, and I like doing both. It's been being able to do a mix of both, of being interviewed and also interviewing people, is so satisfying.
For some people, it's weird to be in that chair because they're usually in this chair. They're like the host of their own show, and so we have people here that they are running their show and they're the interviewer all the time, and then it's awkward. But I was expecting that it wouldn't be awkward for you because I've seen you do both and I've heard you, and I was trying to be adequately prepared to ask you some questions today, and that's rare. I hope you know that that's rare, but like we do a lot of shows. We do 30 to 40 shows a month.
Wow.
And it's not common that somebody can do both chairs well.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, it's not. So I can use an old school example because someone I look at to glean interview best practices from is Larry King.
Oh.
So how many thousands of people did Larry King interview over his lifetime? And maybe he was a guest on a Tonight Show once a year or something like so. Yeah. So there's like this very inverted ratio of him interviewing versus being the one interviewed, and it's not easy to be able to do both. But you're killing it, by the way.
Well, look, I really genuinely enjoy both because I feel like it's just different parts of my brain. And I have a lot to say, you know. And my wife, she's so supportive of everything I do. And you know, even though she's not, it's funny because we've been together 10 years now, and you know, she hears so many of my conversations, you know, with Zoom and everything like that. And so it's funny, she's actually decided to become a founder herself, and she's starting a business, which in 5 years ago, she would have never in a million years.
Yeah.
But it's like listening to me, and she's like, those people are idiots. You know, like I could totally do this. I'm like, you totally could.
So 5 years ago, you would have started a podcast, and 5 years ago, she would have started a business.
Yeah, no, I know. And, you know, that's the other thing, too. People are like, I can't count how many times I've reinvented myself. Yeah. And I'll reinvent myself a few more times, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And that's the part that makes it exciting. There's always this, you know, tension between newness and, you know, sort of consistency. You're always having to make it. There's no optimization. There's only trade-offs.
Yeah. No optimization, only trade-offs. Talk more about that.
Well, again, it's like, you know, you could think about it in relationships, right? Well, you know, the excitement of meeting someone new versus the comfort of having someone who you have shared experiences with. You can't have both, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's just the way life is. You can have the comfort of the thing that you're used to. I'll give you another example. Like, I personally never understand why people like to have a summer home where they go to the same summer home every single year. Like,
yeah, I
would want to go to somewhere different every year. Like, why would you want to go to the same place? Mm-hmm. Some people really value consistency. Some people really value change. I actually like to value both. I like to have a mix of both. And so I think that if the kind of personality that feels comfortable in both areas leads for an optimal life.
Yeah, so you like a little bit of familiarity and some novelty at the same time.
Well, my wife and I, for about a year and a half, we were digital nomads.
Okay.
So company I was at the time was fully virtual. So for a little bit over a year, we sold everything we owned. We were each allowed to have one piece of checked luggage, one roller bag, and in my case, a backpack, and in her case, a purse. Mm-hmm. That was it. Everything on the planet we owned had to fit in one of those. We could buy whatever we wanted, but not unless we got rid of something. And we did that for a little bit over a year, and I'm glad I did it, but I wouldn't do it again, you know, by choice. But it taught me some things, like the excitement of, hey, we're in Ecuador for a month, we're in Tulum for a month, we're in Medellin for a month, wherever. And we're going to find the new coffee shop we go to, and the new restaurant that we're going to make our place where we go to, and the new gym we're going to find. Well, that's exciting, but then there's also the nice part of, I love going to that coffee shop, and I'm so comfortable there. You know, Cheers, right? The place where everyone knows your name. There's that consistency part, and the reality is both are nice.
So how have you been able to take that same, let's say, formula, for lack of a better term? How have you been able to take that same formula of new month, new place, and show up at the same place all the time, maybe with a different guest, but do the same thing routinely in the podcast space? Is that just fit in that like comfort zone for you where you're like, oh, I this is just what I do now. This is what I've committed to do. I'm going to see it through because I said I'm going to do it and I'm a man of my word. How do you reconcile that?
So I'm not sure I 100% understand the question, so my apologies.
Well, no. So we're talking about how like people don't have a summer home, right? Like this is my podcast summer home. I'm here all the time.
Yeah.
Now I get to go and guest at other places, but you have a show that is established now that you have guests on and you have some routine and some regularity. How are you finding yourself still feeling excited about doing podcasts even when the newness has worn off?
So it doesn't feel that way to me at all, only because every guest is new, right? And every show I'm on is new. I mean, I've been on some shows where the guy interviewing me is a character. And same thing, I've had some people on where, oh my God, these guys are such characters. And I just find the whole thing, so it's actually that weird, I hadn't thought about it till you said it, but it's that really nice juxtaposition of there's an aspect of it that's consistent and the same, and there's a part that's always new. It has both in the same thing.
Have you had any conversations recently that maybe... well, I guess surprised. I'm going to say surprised. Have you had any conversations with guests recently, like on a show, you're recording all that and you were honestly like surprised, mouth agape, like, whoa, what?
Well, one of the things I do, I always make sure every guest knows that before I release anything, they'll be able to see it and I can edit out anything they don't want. Because I want people to feel completely comfortable with themselves and talking to me. And I don't want them to feel even the tiniest bit, hey, if you say something you didn't like, we'll edit it out. If you say something you don't want to have said, we'll cut it out. No problem. And one of the episodes, I was actually one of the early ones I did, guy was sharing a story about how his mom pulled a gun on his dad and like pulled the trigger like right in front of him when he was 7. And he told us, the part I thought about the story that was so interesting was he didn't see it as a trauma. Now, the dad had known the mom was crazy and had thankfully unloaded the guns. But the mom didn't know that. She thought it was loaded. And but he told the story. And after I said, by the way, are you okay with me pushing that out? Like, we can edit that out if you want. He said, no, it's good. You can leave it in. That surprised me, not going to lie.
That is probably one of the more wild things someone's told me on the show.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I'm I've had some things that people tell me that are surprising. But that's I think that's the first time I've heard that. Wow. How are you preparing yourself? I know you mentioned earlier you watched some of what people have done, what they're saying. Do you already have an end of mind? You've already explained how, like, you have to kind of be present, you have to be listening, paying attention, navigating the course of the conversation to a specific place. But do you start shows having an end in mind, or are you comfortable with just kicking off a show and then letting the conversation course as it might?
So what I basically do, a lot of the biggest factor that it depends on is how much they've done, right? So I've interviewed people that have done hundreds of podcasts and I've interviewed people that have done 0, right? In some cases, all I have to go on. I mean, actually, I remember I had one, it was actually a really good episode. This guy, Tim Gray, he has a longevity conference he's in the UK, and I couldn't find anything about the guy. And it was when I was doing 13 in 2 days. So like I literally knew nothing about the guy when I was nothing, which is I was unprepared, which is not normal, but it was just a happenstance of circumstances. And so and it ended up being a great episode. With that being said, if that person has a fair amount of content out there, I'll review a good chunk of it. And what I'll do is I'll just think about general concepts. What I'm generally trying to do, like in my business and the David Guttman podcast, is I'm trying to interview people that have good moral compasses, that have had some measure of success, because I think, and that have taken almost everyone's taken some part of their life that's a little bit of a road less traveled. I feel like that's where the biggest lessons are. Mm-hmm. So I try to focus on trying to find their road less traveled, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And so in your part, though, as the host and the brand of the show, do you listen to other podcasters as well? Like not just the guests that maybe have been or on shows or whatever. Are there people in the podcast space that you're actively looking at as examples or models that you're, I'll take this little piece from here, I'll borrow that little piece from there. Oh, that's a good idea over there. Are you aggregating best practices from people, or? I
don't know if I would say it that way. There are definitely people like Diary of a CEO, he's fantastic. I think Joe Rogan's fantastic. Tom Bilyeu is always unbelievably prepared. So I think there are some people like that I've definitely, taken some pages out of their book for sure. But I wouldn't say there's anyone who I sort of model myself after specifically. It's more just like, okay, I want to be as prepared as Tom Bilyeu. I want to be as curious as Joe Rogan, and I want to be as good at, sort of driving the conversation in a particular direction as, Steve Bartlett.
Is there anything that makes you like uncomfortable when you're on set with somebody?
I've only had I've done a couple of episodes where like it's unusable, just because the person is terrible. They don't, either they're unbelievably nervous. I had one guy who developed an unbelievable stutter, so that everything, he didn't have a stutter, but on the podcast he did.
Oh no.
And so it was unusable. But
Yeah.
that's only happened maybe 3 times out of 150.
Yeah.
So nothing makes me uncomfortable. I'm really comfortable in my own skin. There's nothing you could throw at me that would really kind of throw me for a loop.
Well, can we talk? Can we talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Because I do have people that every once in a while they're like, I don't like the way I look or sound. And I'm like, this is the way you look and sound in person. What are you talking about? Like, I've known you for a long time. You're telling me now, 10 years into our friendship, you don't like the way you look and sound because I mentioned to you you might be on camera or that you should be on camera. I preface all this because I see people that have a real true talent for what they do. And this is kind of pulling from that same 10, 15, 20-year experience. I go, how is it you were so successful and you don't know what to say? You don't know what to talk about. How did that happen? At the same time, like, how did it happen that you were so successful? You've been in your career field for 20 years and people didn't like the way you look or sound. It's kind of the same cat, skinning the cat 2 different ways. What happened where you were like, I'm just going to be me and I don't care if you don't like me because of it?
I go back to the hospital room when I was 24. Like, what they say, when your health is great, you have lots of problems. When your health is bad, you have one problem, right? And so it just allowed me to sort of put things in perspective. And, I didn't mention this part, but the cyst I had, it was so rare. There have been 2 medically documented cases like I had, which is why they all misdiagnosed it. They weren't sure if it would reoccur. It reoccurred 8 years later, and when they tried to remove the cyst, they paralyzed my vocal cords, and for 4.5 months I couldn't speak. Literally couldn't talk. So it's funny, you talk about not liking your voice. My voice is different than it was, so I got my voice back, it was pretty clear that maybe I was never going to talk again. I was going to have to get that, my name, like, I'm like, fuck, I'm never getting laid again.
You should still do a show.
But I had the thought, that it's like, I don't take anything for granted, even the ability to speak. I didn't love my spoken voice before. I actually like my voice now way more than I did before I was paralyzed.
Yeah.
So it's a little deeper, a little raspier. I actually lose my voice pretty easily because of that. But that's the other thing. I'm just so grateful that I can even speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, thank you for answering it that way. I'm glad that there's a rootedness in the gratitude part. I think that as I've become older and I've had some like life experiences where health was the only thing, for me in one occasion and for my wife in her occasion, it changed me. I mean, admittedly, it changed me. It changed even why I did this. I don't have to do this. I don't really need to do this in order to compel someone else to do it. I hope that they will because they need to do it for their own purposes, not because I need to fill the room for my reasons. But I think being okay with it changing me was part of accepting the responsibility of showing up this way. And not feeling duty bound, like, oh, I have to do this out of like expectation or obligation, out of true desire for people to have conversations and share their story and for others to maybe be encouraged or inspired by that. Whether they are or aren't, whether it's 1 or it's 1,000 or 10,000, I'm not really care about the outcome. I'm trying to show up and do a good job. And I'm trying to show up and be prepared. I want people to have a good experience here on the set. And I want people to be able to sit in the guest chair when they're normally in the host chair and raise the level of exposure for their own channels too.
I consider it a genuine privilege to be able to interview people, genuinely. And like I said, I learn something every single time. And I feel it's a privilege to be a guest too. Like I really try to do my best work because I think it's important to deliver value whenever you can.
Yeah. Do you have, this is probably going to, this might be a problem question. I don't mean for it to be a problem question. Do you have people you want to interview that you haven't been able to get booked yet that you really, really want?
So I have some Mount Rushmore people. So this first guy you'll never have heard of, Cale Sanderson. He's the head wrestling coach at Penn State. He was an undefeated 4-time national champ, gold medalist in the Olympics, and he will be the winningest Division I coach of any sport in the history of Division I sports. And no one's ever heard of the guy. He's never done a podcast. So he's one of my Mount Rushmores. Chase Hughes is another one of my Mount Rushmores. I think he's the most knowledgeable, capable human being when it comes to persuasion on the planet. So yeah, there's some people who who I would love to have on who I haven't. But it's a work in progress.
Yeah. Do you have anything that you're changing for this next evolution of the cycle for your show life? Is there something you're going to be doing differently? Do you feel like you're kind of locked in with your show method? Is there anything new or novel coming up that people should be looking out for?
I don't think so, because I don't think of it as there's nothing gimmicky or and again, I don't knock people that do this, but they're even people who I really like Steve Bartlett. Some people have a formulaic piece to it, like they have speed round questions at the end, and stuff like that. For me personally, that's just not a good fit for me.
Yeah.
I feel really comfortable the way I'm doing it now, but the one thing that I pride myself on, because I think it helps me have a more content and satisfying life, is I allow for everything to change.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I think I'm going to keep it the way it is, but who knows?
So this is a different attack angle on a similar question, is if you could interview anyone in history, who would it be? You have your Mount Rushmore people you want to get that are still here, right? Okay. Who would you maybe wanted to, if podcasting were a thing in the 13th century, who would you want to go back at history and have a crack at interviewing?
I'd like to interview Ayn Rand.
Tell me about that.
So Atlas Shrugged is my favorite book. My daughter's middle name is Dagny, after Dagny Taggart. I actually read, it's a 1,200-page book. I read it in 36 hours. I didn't sleep.
36 hours?
I read it 36 hours straight. I finished that book. And I've read it cover to cover 6 or 8 times, and I've listened to the unabridged audio tape 3 or 4 times. I feel like any entrepreneur should read or listen to that book. And it's very, very timely too, in terms of some of the things that are happening, socialism and stuff like that in our country. So yeah, I think that, and not only that, but if you understand her personal life, she was a disaster personally. I mean, I think her philosophy was fascinating, and there's a lot of real value there, but she was an absolute disaster personally. So I think she'd be really fun to interview.
Isn't that always fascinating, where people who have had this crazy life do something that's so heralded?
Yeah.
It's not like they intrinsically always go together, but there's so many examples of that where there's this situation that doesn't make sense, and there's this thing we hold up here as this bastion of reverence in whatever space it is: media, music, books, advertising, marketing, business, whatever. I hate to say it's a common thread, but there's so many traces of that.
I feel like it is almost always MLK, JFK, Ayn Rand, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, these people that are just so unbelievably capable. Everything comes with everything comes as a package deal.
Yeah, yeah. If you could go back and change something, would you? Leading up to this point of becoming a podcaster, I know that all the roads you've taken has kind of led you here, but if you were to go back and tinker with anything, would you even dare to?
I would definitely have done the podcast sooner. That 100% I would do. As an example, would I go back and, in fact, it's kind of a funny story. My daughter, as I mentioned off camera, I got divorced from my first wife when my daughter was only 1. And she was maybe 9. And she said to me, she calls me Podge. She's like, Podge, I don't think I've ever met 2 adults more poorly suited for each other than you and Mom. And she's not wrong. My ex-wife and I, terrible match. We have a wonderful daughter. So would I go back and change that? No, I don't think I would, even though she was definitely not the right person for me. And not just because I have a great daughter from it, but it's the whole thing, you either win or you learn. That is true. And when you really think about it, I can trace none of my good qualities to something good that happened. None. I can only trade all my good qualities, mapped it back to some obstacle I had to overcome, some hardship I had. Wrestling in particular. I mean, wrestling was such a wonderful sport. It's a lot of hardship baked into wrestling, and a lot of who I am as a human being came from that experience.
From the outside looking in, wrestling looks like a sport where it's you versus the other guy, and I'm willing to contend that you'll agree with this statement. Wrestling is usually you versus what you think you're able to tolerate.
So I will eventually write a book about wrestling specifically. It's going to be called Pain is Your Ally. Here's the thing that's different by wrestling than any other sport. And I played 4 sports competitively in high school, and I probably played 8 or 9 sports competitively throughout my life. Been an athlete my whole life. If you give me someone in 7th grade, I don't care, tall, short, skinny, fat, slow, fast, dumb, smart, doesn't matter. You give me that kid in 7th grade, by the time he's a senior, he will win 75% of his matches if he does every single thing I tell him to do. There is no other sport like that.
Wow.
And now at the college level, it's a whole different thing. But at the high school level, if you are better prepared and you can endure the pain, and you see pain as your ally, if you will, you're going to win most of the time. And I feel like that's what life is a lot like, which is if you put in the work and you prepare yourself, you won't always win, but you'll win a lot.
Man, there's a real lesson out there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's there's no better. Like if I had a son, just like my dad literally gave me no choice. I had to wrestle. That was not an option for me not to. If I had a son, I'd be the same thing. He wouldn't have a choice.
I want to give you a chance to talk or to address. I'm gonna say one person. I'm sure there's many people you could thank, but if I handed you a microphone and you're standing in an arena with 100,000 people listening, and you have the opportunity to tell somebody thanks, who would you thank and what would you say?
I would thank my dad. I didn't always see it at the time. And I don't think I've been a bad son, but I could have been a better son. I think my dad loved me as much as you could possibly love another human being. And he did things for me that, helped me become the person that I am. And the other person would be my wife. She's just been an unbelievable support. And it's like, you know what it is? It's when you can see yourself through their eyes, that can be really inspiring.
I like that. Thank you for saying that. I don't know if you've ever been asked that or not.
I've never been asked that question before.
Last question for you today. And thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you.
I sincerely appreciate your time. You're actually in town to do a TED Talk. So thank you for, you could be preparing for that and you're here spending time with this bald guy ranting in the corner. I appreciate that very much. You mentioned earlier in our conversation that you're always learning something during every show. Is there something that you learned during this one?
Yeah, actually, I feel like I really like your approach because, like I said, I don't generally prepare questions for my podcast, and I think I might add a little bit of that to my podcast actually because of this conversation.
There's a lot of things I didn't ask you. There's a lot of things I was going to ask you, and I scrapped it about 3 minutes in. So I've been on the same screen since we started. I appreciate you being flexible with me today, and the majority of what I asked and talked to you about, I had no course for doing. So thank you for just meeting me in that place, man.
Well, look, I think what you're doing is important. Not enough people are doing podcasts. I know. It's going to sound crazy, but literally everyone who could do a podcast should do a podcast.
Yeah.
I know that sounds crazy because you're like, who's going to watch them all? But at the end of the day, that's not really the point.
Yeah.
It's most people have something useful to say if they really think about it. Most people don't think about it.
Yeah, and I think some people undersell the value of what they have to share because we're our own worst. Most times we're our own worst critic. We talk so negatively to ourselves sometimes, way more than someone else. I wouldn't dare let you say the things to me that I say to me.
Yeah.
Have you been there?
Absolutely. I'm always except for my daughter. She's my harshest critic, but I'm my second harshest critic.
You hear that, Jill? I think that's just something common in us where, man, I say the things I say to me, man, if someone else said to me, we'd probably end up in a fight.
I will say, I actually am, it's funny you say that. I'm very careful about how I talk to myself.
Yeah.
I'm a very harsh critic of myself for sure. But people it's actually advice I give people that I mentor is be careful about how you talk to yourself because it's a form of brainwashing, right? And ultimately you want to, create the best version of yourself, and negative talk to yourself is not a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Constructive criticize me upwards.
Yeah. Absolutely.
David, thank you so much for coming by the studio. I know you're very busy, and I know that you have an awesome talk scheduled. I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm also so thankful that people I've like sat on the production side and listened to my other host interview. You've also interviewed, so I am so grateful for you stepping forward. I think this is a great example for people, no matter where you find yourself in life, in business, retire from business, mentoring, investing. You don't have a podcast yet. Maybe you have a podcast. You're not sure if you can get past that 4th show or that 20th show. Just keep going. Just commit. Do your best. Bring something. I guarantee, just as you've been a recipient on the receiving side of the screen where someone said something that helped you out, you will also do and say something that helps them out too. And that's my final encouragement for the day.
Andy, thanks so much for having me.
I appreciate you being here. Thank you all for watching. Everybody Has a Podcast. We appreciate you being here so much, whether it's all 2 of you or all 200,000 or 2 million. I don't care how many it is. I'm just grateful for you guys spending some time with us today. Thank you. We hope you're well. And if you need to reach David Guttman, you'll find his social media handles in the description box below. Thanks for tuning in. And if this conversation helped you in a way or will help someone you love and care about, please share this with them and encourage them to listen to more of the David Guttman podcast. Thank you all. We'll see you with another great guest next week.